Wow. I'm getting a really strong case of reverse deja vu right now. That Christian, if you've got a problem, change your fudging engine. Yeah, this whole thing is bizarre, isn't it? Yesterday, there was a meeting of an F1 commission looking into the technical and supplemental logistics in what to do with next year's regulations. More specifically, ensuring the powertrain doesn't run out of puff down Monza's famous straight, for example. I'm more concerned about Mexico straight, by the way, and the altitude and whatnot. That maybe cars would have to downshift. That would be completely unnatural, and then you'd have to worry about battery regulation and deployment. It would just be a complete and utter mess. You wouldn't be able to go, I would like to accelerate, please. And now all of this is manifested into Toto versus Christian I've lost count. Oh, and that V10 thing? Oh, that's no longer a thing. That's 2030's problem. So what Red Bull and others want to do is to rebalance the engine versus battery output to maybe favour the engine more. 64-36 for races, keep it 50-50 for qualifying. Right now, batteries provide about 20% of a car's power, so what seemed like a leap forward now feels more like a cautious hop. So it kind of just pours a little bit of water onto 2026 if this actually happens. But Toto has had his say, and yeah, okay, I'll do the voice. Reading the agenda of the F1 Commission is almost as hilarious as reading some of the comments that I see on Twitter on American politics. I really want to protect ourselves and make no comment, but it is a joke. Like a week ago, there's an engine meeting, and then there's things like this. It ends up on the agenda again. I hate to say it, Toto, but that was a comment. To him, these calls for tweaks are pure politics, not real technical concerns. And Mercedes, they're ready to dig their heels in and keep the current rules as they are, frozen. Basically telling Christian to take his pumpernickel and eat it. Yeah, because of the whole battery thing, running out of puff, wasn't that Ford's thing to deal with in this partnership? So, is Ford hitting a stumbling block? Oops. And quite frankly, I think Toto's going to win this one simply for the fact that going into next year, Mercedes still maintain 3 customers in their wheelhouse. It means that 4 of the 11 teams will be powered, that 4th customer being Alpine, replacing Aston Martin, and that is a lot of leverage. And what's more important is that Audi and Honda, they're very much likely to go with what Mercedes are saying because that's the rules that they agreed to back in 22 and 23 respectively. So why would they want to diminish the priority of the battery? That hybrid technology is what brought them into Formula 1 in the first place. I mean, the V10 issue was bad enough. They managed to quash that, but now reducing what the battery is doing, the priority going from 20% this year to 36%. So I think Red Bull right now, they might be just shouting into the wind tunnel. For any of Red Bull's proposals to gain traction, Ferrari has to back them because they'll be supplying 3 teams next year, Haas, themselves and Cadillac, which gives their vote a bit of weight. And right now, Ferrari is sitting on the fence. They're not really wanting to get involved in this drama because, quite frankly, there's a lot of drama going on this year. But Fred Vasseur, he's not really commented on where Ferrari stands at the moment. Maybe they're just fine the way they are, but also they're open to some changes which might maybe benefit some other components in terms of wear and tear. It's hard to say. Maybe if a middle ground is actually negotiated upon, Ferrari might be willing to talk about it rather than Mercedes, who are completely not willing to budge. So, for now, Ferrari's just staying out of this one. Fred reminding us all that these changes are more comprehensive than they were in 2022, because those power units, well, on the engine side, the technical side, they weren't really changing. There was an engine freeze. This is now actually dealing with the engine rules, the sporting rules, and the chassis rules. It's a really big change, so for now, Fred is not willing to vacillate over it. Get it? And okay, let's be fair to Christian here. I know some of you out there do not want to give that man any kind of an inch, but we do have to remind ourselves here that he's not just started complaining about these rules. He's been ringing the alarm bells since 2023, warning that combining radically new chassis and power unit regulations could create what he called Frankenstein cars. Verstappen echoing his sentiment, calling the original draft terrible. And while the rules have evolved since then, Horner clearly is not convinced all the bugs have gone yet. Some whispers even suggest the real issue could be Red Bull's own engine program, specifically the battery tech. I mean, that is pure speculation right now because I'm not a qualified engineer, even though I wield the spanner. So if anyone down there in the comments is more qualified than I, a professional yapper from on top of a ladder, do enlighten us in the comments to actually maybe figure out why Red Bull's really a bit skittish with these regulations. And from Red Bull's point of view, they're just trying to be the hero, arguing that their advanced development work, it might have exposed limitations others hadn't found yet. Either they are ahead, or the rest are behind and staying quiet. Either way, Christian wants the FIA to take these concerns seriously before it's too late and a PR disaster lays at the door of everyone concerned, like in 2014. As far as Red Bull is concerned, they're meeting the targets, everything's going hunky-dory, and one thing that they're really turning the screw on is that Christian Horner is completely ensconced in the work that the powertrains division is doing to be fully self-reliant in terms of powertrains for the first time in Red Bull's history, no longer having to deal with the likes of Renault or Honda. They can do it all themselves, meaning that they could fail by themselves. And Toto, admittedly, yes, the high-power performance division is different to the AMG F1 team. You know, they work together, but they do work in separate places. So you could easily say that Toto is being fed things, he's not fully immersed in it. But we don't know the full machinations of that relationship. But you got to admit, that is a lot of shade, where Christian's going, well, I'm not really sure what Toto knows about the engine business. Oh, Christian, oh! In any case, Horner insists Red Bull's first engine, it's on track, that raising these issues is about avoiding a problem for F1 as a whole, not Red Bull lacking confidence, no, no, no. And with so many unknowns next year, Horner prefers to err on the side of caution and refine the rules right now, even if it means publicly opposing a rival team's viewpoint. And speaking of Toto, his stance on next year's regulations are firm. No backpedaling, no politics, no panic. For him, as far as he's concerned, he's kind of excited and has been excited since 2023 when Horner also brought up those issues for the first time. This was going to be a perfect harmony, Toto said, of existing technology and electrification. That this struck a really good balance where conventional power and new electrical power could work in harmony, and also it's relevant technology, hybrid tech. So that's probably why it's going to go ahead, unlike the V10 thing, because no one's building V10s to scale. Also, as we talked about earlier, these regulations as they are right now were enough to convince Audi and Honda to come into Formula One. So therefore, it just really makes me think Audi's not going to agree to this because this is diminishing all of the investment that they put into this engine project, buying out Sauber entirely. Probably nigh on $1 billion has been spent on this initiative and then eschewing other motorsporting commitments. To give up all of that for Formula One, and then the regulators then go, Wolff also doesn't buy the panic from rivals, especially Red Bull. He's questioned Christian Horner's motives, suggesting that the complaints are less about concern for the sport and more about his own power unit struggles or Ford's acclamation to F1 after many years out of the game, ever since they sold Jaguar to, ironically, Red Bull. What Wolff is trying to get at here is that he's telling the world that Christian Horner, he's not concerned about the sport. No, he's got a lot of fears going on behind the scenes at Red Bull Powertrains that they are going to be underperforming, under-delivering, and if Max Verstappen is around with them next year, then he might walk, because it might be in no condition to go for a title, no matter how good the aero is. That was the issue in 2014. It was a fairly solid car, but it lacked grunt. Gamesmanship, that's it, gamesmanship. It was basically, in Toto's mind, Christian flexing his spin doctor muscles. And as far as Mercedes are concerned, the team sees no major flaws in the upcoming rules, just the usual challenges to be engineered around whenever there's a major change, much like with the introduction of the 2014 packages. And that maybe if there are any issues that crop up, then let them play out in the first year of the regulations, allow the FIA to adjust them accordingly using on-track evidence. And that's exactly what happened in 2014. There were concerns going into that year, but they weren't fully realised until we went to Albert Park, and you were like going, wait, what's that? Sorry, is that a vacuum cleaner or a car? Seriously, the noise was terrible in that there was barely any, especially for the TV cameras. It might have been a bit better on track, I wasn't there, but it really put me off. It was just like, ugh, especially when you came from V8s. But sure enough, they did fix the problem, and now we have a V6 turbo hybrid unit, which does sound fairly reasonable. So in Toto's mind right now, if you're going to make changes, wait until they're actually on a track, not before, based on speculation and fear, or worries about lacking entertainment. And Andy Cowell over at Aston Martin agrees with Toto as well, although to be fair, remember where Cowell came from, the high-powered performance division of Mercedes. And according to many sources, insiders around the paddock are really believing Toto, that they actually might have a good car. Even Alex Albon over at Williams has been saying that sticking around with Mercedes power for the rest of the decade, which Williams are doing so, that might be a safe bet. Alex and Toto's relationship has come on a long way, hasn't it, since 2021, when Toto was so fearful of Alex joining Williams that he considered the Red Bull driver, the former Red Bull driver, to be some kind of mole for Christian, and that's why they had to break up their ties. I mean, that was classic 2021 paranoia right there. It was at the peak of their tension. They remained willing to supply 3 customers instead of consolidating and just dropping Aston Martin's slot and not putting it up for sale anymore. More engines means faster development, more proof perhaps that Mercedes is ready to dominate again. And you've only got to look at what Flavio Briatore is doing over at Alpine to get these Mercedes engines. They went in hard. They were desperate for these power units to take up the slack that Aston Martin was providing when they moved over to Honda. That clearly Flavio, as he was trying to bargain this deal, saw something in the data, saw something on the dyno that made him realise that, no, Renault is absolutely terrible. We got to get these Mercedes power units away, absolutely. That's exactly it. You have Mercedes grunt and Gasly just going, ugh. I'm not, They thought that their Renault power unit for next year was actually looking really good on the dyno, but then that was totally mothballed. Their jobs cast out into the winds. So, yeah, Wolff, in short, is just saying, keep things the way they are, everything is going fine, if there is a problem, we'll figure it out for 2027. Basically, just don't turn the whole thing into a political agenda. Now, okay, I can understand that for some of you casual fans out there, you might not really be au fait with the engineering world, nor might you be inclined into that, more about focusing on driver drama and driver vibes. But I do have to remind you that this does have some sort of connection to driver drama and team principal drama, because seasoned F1 viewers will be fully aware of what's going on right now. This is yet another stage for Horner and Wolff to do battle. So don't worry, it's gonna get good. Using his PR powers, Horner has cast himself as the guardian of F1's soul, warning against turning the sport into an engineering utopia, one that sacrifices spectacle for the sake of absolute pinnacle technology. But wasn't that the point of Formula One, to be the absolute peak of what you can do in engineering, alongside the Bugatti whatever they make? Anyway, Christian's just basically saying keep the rules flexible for the sake of entertainment. That's it. Maintaining the show as it is right now might be wise, since it is actually making Formula One popular, cool, relevant, profitable, whatever you want. But I can understand that some of you more technically minded fans might be really annoyed right now. But let's not forget, Horner's not been completely magnanimous. He's often clapped back at Wolff, saying things were typically Toto, accusing him of putting Mercedes' interest above the sport. Maybe even desperate to find any way of getting back to the top after a few years of wandering around the wilderness in the ground effect era. Christian Horner is more than happy to tell anybody who will listen that he is fully immersed in the Red Bull powertrains division, it being within Milton Keynes as far as I can recall. Everything is completely under his watch. He knows everything. And it's my personal belief that if something does happen to his job where he can no longer be team principal, they'll shuffle Christian off to the powertrains division, out of the media limelight, so he can then just tinker with those engines some more. And admittedly, and accurately, Toto is not in charge of the engine division. The engine division report to him, in charge of Formula One, one of the major shareholders of the team, so there is a little bit of a disconnect that is thoroughly valid of Christian to say. And honestly, I can't blame Christian for being happy, because this is going to be the first time in Red Bull's history that they can do everything themselves. They don't have to worry about Renault under-delivering and under-investing, or Honda playing hokey-cokey with F1 for the billionth time. But then you get Wolff clapping back, saying that Horner's simply frightened about Red Bull's engine progress. His narrative? Mercedes is calm, prepared, chilled, focused. Red Bull is nervous and angling for rule changes to cover a potential shortfall. It's a classic psychological play we have seen so many times now. And what Wolff needs to do right now is do what he's been doing multiple times throughout his entire career as the team principal of Mercedes. To remain firm, upright, chest out, and completely resolute in his approach, make Christian out to be completely desperate, and maybe his steadfastness, the multiple customers of Mercedes, may win more people over, maybe even convince Ferrari to join sides. And let's not forget the connection that Toto and Fred have. They are very close friends. Even if they are at odds in terms of competition, they are still good buddies, probably more so buddies than Fred is with Christian. So that is something to consider if things do get really heated and Ferrari really is the kingmaker here. And this is not the first time we have seen both these teams trying to get the FIA to either change the rules or keep them as they are. 2014 saw Red Bull protest Renault's weak engines, demanding equalisation, whilst Mercedes insisted on keeping things as they were. Then Red Bull lobbied hard for 2022 and the engine freeze, which they did win by the way, whilst Honda were completely vacillating, and now the roles have flipped again. And if Stefano Domenicali wants, as he claims, to have more controversies next year, then oh, he's gonna be getting it, because right now, what they're doing, Red Bull, Mercedes, is trying to vie for dominance for the rest of the 2020s, and it's all to do with this being, I think, an engine formula, or an engine battery formula. For fans, it's high-stakes chess disguised as press quotes. Behind the scenes, they're lobbying the FIA, spinning narratives, rallying support, again from Ferrari. Horner's calling what he's doing for the greater good, pretty much, and he's meant to pressure regulators to imply that Toto, oh, he's being a buzzkill, he's no fun. But Wolff is simply not blinking. He's just basically saying, well, what that means is that you're the problem, and we're just going to be seeing a complete Uno reverse of that Drive to Survive scene. And this is just wild how things have turned, that I do think Red Bull is behind in some capacity, but at the same time, I'm not quite sure whether or not Wolff is genuinely confident about Mercedes. I don't know. Is this true? Is this all posturing from both sides? This intrigue is enough to generate some drama, but I think a lot of people who do love this kind of drama between the two team principals, oh, they're going to get it now, because both men want to shape the future of Formula One until the rules change again in 2030. Or maybe they might stay the same. It depends on how long they last, because these turbo hybrid units, they've lasted a good 12 years. It might last beyond 2030. I mean, I hope so, because Cadillac's joining in 2029, so them building a power unit to only be used for 1 year? I mean, I hope General Motors got deep pockets. As this is playing out, though, it is true to say that the Red Bull project partnered by Ford is objectively unproven, despite the insight gained by Honda's continuing cooperation until now. Just how solid is Red Bull's all-new power unit program? Quite frankly, if Red Bull is able to be right on par with everyone else in their first year, that would be a huge achievement, just to be exactly where they are right now. Just not being a Renault when they're being 30-40 horsepower down, because even if that were the case, for their first season, that would have been perfectly understandable. They would have to really make it up in the aero, which has been Red Bull's bread and butter for the longest time, under Adrian Newey. But then they don't have Newey anymore. And Vache has only now started to realise that, hey, he might have been a bit stubborn for the longest time and not listening to their drivers. Checo was right. So therefore, it just makes you think, well, okay, if they are confident, why are you producing all of this noise then, Christian? Red Bull has been the loudest voice urging a rethink of the regulations, you can't deny that. It's raised eyebrows, therefore, brought down this ladder for you today. Are they genuinely concerned about the sport, or are they trying to cushion against early struggles? Maybe Red Bull have identified a real issue, like the issue of lifting and coasting. Or maybe, as whispers suggest, early dyno data has exposed power or efficiency concerns, which is why the call for less to be called upon the battery pack has cropped up. Now, okay, let's be real. No F1 team is going to straight up come out and say, oh, we are really bad right now. They might be saying, yes, we have dealt with some challenges, but we can figure it out because, well, it's all brand new technology. Engineering is very, very complicated. You are going to come across some pitfalls. Honda has recently said that there have been more challenges that they didn't expect initially when they were initially confident. It can happen. You don't just say, yeah, no, we're going to suck. You don't do that. But then again, calling upon the FIA and Formula One to change the regulations that might benefit you or change things significantly, it does procure a sense of unease at Red Bull that I don't think they can shake. Because we've seen it before. Mercedes with the porpoising, and Red Bull themselves with the flexi wings this year. They're two recent examples. A slight shift in the rules could maybe make the formula friendlier for a brand new engine operation. Them having been already granted 4 years pause in engine development already to be ready for 2026. Horner denying any sense of self-interest. But his track record says otherwise because, again, going back to Renault, in the mid-2010s, Renault had completely dropped the ball so hard that in the rush to try and find an alternative engine supplier, Red Bull, Horner, even threatened to quit the sport. In 2018, they managed to find a solution that really capitalized on their two-team solution, Toro Rosso and Red Bull, which meant that Renault would bugger off from Toro Rosso and they would get Carlos Sainz in return, meaning that they could pilot the Honda project with the lower team after it really not working out with McLaren. But as Pierre Gasly showed us at the beginning in Bahrain, it actually had some grunt and potential, which resulted in Red Bull bringing it in for their team in 2019. And many people are calling out that this operation really benefited them in the long run, and that a two-team operation in this capacity should be outlawed. This is an example here. And when I was speculating about making this a topic for today, some people on Twitter did point out that maybe they could try and do that again, that in 2026 they could find some way of running another engine at Red Bull Racing and use Racing Bulls for the Red Bull powertrains partnered by Ford. On paper, yes, it could work, but in reality, no, it's impossible. Honda's locked in with Aston Martin for next year, and they seem quite happy with this, thank you very much. Red Bull, they've gone all in on their own engine, so falling back to another supplier now, it'd be a PR disaster, a contractual mess, and politically toxic. Getting Honda to partner up with them for one more year and trying to get Aston Martin to just show some mercy, yeah, that's not going to happen. You seriously think that Papa Stroll is going to show leniency with the likes of Christian? And the grid offers few lifelines. Audi's committed to Sauber entirely, Ferrari's got enough customers already, and Mercedes, you think they would supply Red Bull? They completely spurned them the first time when they were trying to get rid of Renault. They're not going to do that again. And Renault, you really think they would suddenly come back and work with Red Bull after all the stuff that Christian has been saying about Cyril Abiteboul, as well as Renault in general? And for a couple of years, they couldn't even be bothered to badge the Renault engines as Renault and call them Tag Heuer engines, in that they were so embarrassed by Renault that Red Bull have burnt all their bridges in committing to their own deal after getting angry with Honda going, we're going to leave. Oh, no, we're winning, we'll come back. No, they want independence, they're getting independence. There's no turning back. Ford must deliver. So yes, the tug of war between Christian and Toto right now, it's not just yet another chapter of this saga. This is probably the biggest one yet, where both men are at the peak of their powers and can really set the tone for the rest of the 2020s. Behind the PR spin, both are doing exactly what top team bosses should, fighting for their own interests while framing it as fighting for the sport. Horner warns that next year's formula could risk making F1 dull and overly technical, lobbying for tweaks to prioritise the show, whilst Wolff counters that the current rules, painstakingly negotiated to get Audi and Honda in, must be protected. And each side has valid points and something to lose if they are proven wrong. And yesterday's meeting showed that no sweeping changes would be made. The V10s were kicked into the grass, as some people said, and there were some concessions being made in terms of financial support for struggling teams and power units if they actually end up being behind, so Red Bull might get something out of it. But at the same time, these sweeping rules in terms of the technical side, yeah, no one's budging at the moment. No one's really come up with a duller solution. And quite frankly, I think this is right. We should just stick to the guns, and if something does come up, then change it, which is actually relevant to the actual problem, instead of thinking of hypotheticals. At least wait until you can put a brand new engine in a mule car. And if we do see changes being made for 2027, I think Christian and Toto can claim some sense of victory. If the power units work perfectly, there are no problems, and Wolff can claim even more victory that he was proven right. He can have his I told you so moment. However, Christian is going to be insufferably smug if we turn up to Shanghai, the Chinese Grand Prix, you go down that long straight, and then you do get clipping, you get lifting and coasting, you get Verstappen downshifting and complaining about it upon their first lap in practice. Oh, if that happens, Horner is going to be absolutely relentless. So yeah, both men, they're terrified of 2014 happening again, because quite frankly, I stopped watching Formula 1 between 14 and 15. The only thing that really keeping me interested was seeing Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton's friendship completely evaporate. That was the only thing that kept me coming back. It wasn't like I completely ditched it, I was just busy with other things. It was just there in the background, and both men's fate right now is to prevent a repeat of that. Though, admittedly, they do differ in how best to avoid that problem. So yeah, this is F1 Politica at its peak. You're getting them jibing with each other on the media, talking about technical regulations, lobbying the FIA. Oh, it's all here, baby. Every single move is calculated. Both men have arguments, but I think ultimately Toto will win the day simply for the fact he's got that leverage. That leverage will tip the scales in my honest opinion, but it's not going to stop Christian from, well, giving it a go. Much like how Charles Leclerc right now is seeking to tip the scales in his favour at Ferrari, being their guiding light as they aim to claw back the deficit they have to the current top three. To find out why Charles is trying to bring Ferrari and the Tifosi some sense of morale right now whilst they get back on their feet, watch this video next, straight after this one.